But it's curious, you know, the way that Ambrose rose up in this little club in Bond Street. 3 saxophones, 2 brass and a rhythm section, playing only choruses and nothing. And why was it popular? The Prince of Wales liked him. And when Hammy went back to America, they sent a wire, come back, and of course he was made, you know, just from that.
It was at the Embassy Club. As you know, the Embassy Club was the most in the world.
Joe Crossman, who became one of the principal saxophonists in the Ambrose band of those years.
This was around about early 1927, I believe. Eventually, he got this offer from Sir Francis Towle at the Mayfair Hotel at a very, very high salary. And I was honored to be the only member of that orchestra to join with him at the Mayfair. He much liked the baritone work, see, because he could play violin obligatos very nicely to that, and a nice contrast. And I remember that people used to crowd round the bandstand at the Mayfair Hotel and admire the music. And Ambrose, I think he was a little jealous, you know, because this baritone sax was rather an odd instrument to these people in the early days. And he'd say, aha, sex appeal there.
And not only from Joe Crossman, the band had girl appeal in the person of its singer of those times, someone almost inseparable from Ambrose for many years, Sam Browne.
For it was at the dance, I was in a trance, 11:30 Saturday night. In my arms I held a world of charms, 11:30 Saturday night. At 8 my fate had just begun. It grew quite late before love had won. Oh, can't you see, she's accepted me, 11:30 Saturday night.
Sam Browne. During those first years at the Mayfair, the quality of Ambrose's music was almost entirely in the hands of arranger Lou Stone. His contribution to the success of the band was immense. Then onto the scene came a musician who, throughout the 30s, wrote some of the most often recalled items in the Ambrose repertoire, Sid Phillips. I asked him how he came to join the band.
I was bribed by Ambrose to come in because I had decided to stop playing and devote myself entirely to writing. And I had just joined the Lawrence Wright Music Company, and I'd done my first 2 arrangements for Ambrose, for the company, working for the company, as you know, not for myself. These were Japanese Dream and Moanin For You. And shortly after that, Bert phoned me up and said, I understand that you play the saxophone and the clarinet. I said, yes, I do. Well, come and join the band. I'm sorry, no, I've given it up. How much do you want? Well, I'm sorry, I've given it up. I'll give you £25 a week. Oh. I said, well, all right, we'll try. Okay, and I started that way.
To take his place alongside now legendary names like Ted Heath and Lou Davis, Max Goldberg, Billy Amstel, and the phenomenal clarinetist Danny Polo.
Softly weep, honey, it's only me, moaning for you. Take the howl of the wintry breeze, take that owl in the lonely trees, honey, it's only me, moaning for you. And if you like rain. And as long as we're far apart, every song of an aching heart, honey, it's only me moaning for you.
Moanin For You, which Sid Phillips reminded us was one of his earliest arrangements for Ambrose. On February the 22nd, 1930, Sam Browne and the Ambrose Orchestra shared an historic moment, the first ever recording of what has become one of the classics of popular songs, Body and Soul.
My heart is sad and lonely. I wait and sigh for you, dear only. I tell you I mean it. I'm all for you, body and soul. I spend my days in longing and wondering why it's me you're wronging. Why haven't you seen it? I'm all for you, body and soul. I can't believe it, it's hard to conceive it, that you turn away romance. Are you pretending? Don't say it's the ending. I wish I could have one more chance to prove, dear, my life a hell you're making. You know I'm yours for just the taking. I'd gladly surrender myself to you, body and soul.
According to a letter from Lou Stone published in the Melody Maker in June 1952, which I paraphrase, Gertrude Lawrence came into the Mayfair one evening and asked Lou Stone to look through a set of manuscripts. He took them home and among them found the badly scrawled original of this Johnny Green song, Body and Soul. Lou was so impressed with it that he wrote an arrangement and the Ambrose Orchestra performed it that evening. It attracted attention immediately and was requested night after night. The American office of Johnny Green's publishers heard of the public's reaction, and the song was then on its way to world fame. The tailpiece to the story is that Lou Stone, on his way to the Mayfair one night to return all the manuscripts, dropped into a Lyons corner house for a cup of tea and inadvertently left them there. And to this day, they've never reappeared. What else was lost? Who knows, but happily, Body and Soul was saved.
I gladly surrender myself to you, body and soul.
While reminding ourselves of one of Ambrose's greatest hits of the early 30s, we should recall another, an enormous favorite which featured Elsie Carlile.
We're still in the gay 90s. It is the very next day. Our hero's forlorn 'cause his girl's gone and don't know just what to say. He thinks that he'd better do something to win her again for his own. 'Cause she was his very best sweetheart. She was always good for a loan. He goes straight to her mansion and says, forgive me, dear. And as he tried to embrace her, she gave him a boot in the rear. He swept down the steps so majestic, and her footman booted him too. And as they threw him in the brougham, she said, to you. Home, James, and don't spare the horses. Drive right through the main part of town. Home, James, and don't spare the horses. he'll stand up 'cause he can't sit down. Oh, James, the fair horses, my lover is just a bit tight. Oh, James, the fair horses, he shall sleep in the stable tonight.
From the spring of 1927 to the autumn of 1933, Ambrose and his orchestra at the Mayfair were the focal point of London's society nightlife. And the BBC relays every Saturday evening became a national institution, allowing millions of listeners to share the glamorous atmosphere. What was it about the man and his music that created the aura? Joe Crossman.
He was a man who commanded respect. Even Sir Francis Towell, who was the most formidable figure, a very tall and stately man. With Ambrose, he was very humble. Ambrose could be very charming indeed. He could turn it on when he liked, and people would melt under his spell, And on the other hand, he could be terse. And at the Mayfair, I used to think he was more or less supercilious. I remember once a nice, genial old gentleman came up very jovially and said, "I bet you can't play the Blue Danube." And Ambrose retorted, to my horror, "You're damn right, sir, we can't." So Ambrose could be very difficult at times, and he could be so very, very charming.
And Sid Phillips' views on Ambrose the man?
I should say he was a man of impeccable taste. A taste that seemed to go through everything with which he was concerned. He dressed beautifully. The musicians he picked were the top. And he wouldn't settle for anything but the best performance by the band.
Continental. In that one performance, all the quality, precision, the tastefulness that was the Ambrose Orchestra. The title, of course, the Continental, brings to mind the summer visits the band used to make to the south of France, and in Ambrose's case, to the casino. Cyril Stapleton.
I sat in his flat one afternoon listening to his life story. He was in his pyjamas about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he told me that when he used to go down to the south of France before the war, that if he saw the Aga Khan put £1,000 on a card, he'd put £2,000 to show him that he had more money than he had. I know another story of him that he told me himself that he took the band there to play at Biarritz at the casino. And they'd opened a place specially for Ambrose to play, and they'd call it the Chez Ambrose. And the first night he went on the stage and conducted the band. The second night the proprietor said, "You don't want to do that, do you, Emmy? You don't want to conduct the band. Come and have a game in the rooms." And that was the last time Ambrose conducted the band during the month of their stay at the Chez Ambrose. When he came out, he had to go back for the next 3 years for nothing to repay the money that he lost. He was a character.
And what did Ambrose himself think about it?
I unfortunately have been a gambler my whole life, and I could lose many thousands of pounds in one night and go home and have a good rest, a good sleep, and it wouldn't worry me. But if the band played badly that night, I'd have a restless night. We worked very hard. I was very proud of the band at that time, and I took great care, and the boys were very interested. And that was my life. I loved it so much, and I wanted it to be good.
And it was extremely good, especially during the years of the mid-30s, when the orchestra made some of its most famous records. Among the arrangers writing with Sid Phillips at this time was the band's pianist, Bert Barnes, who scored, among others, Embassy Stomp and this tune, Hors D'Oeuvres. In this period, too, Sid Phillips composed what became his and Ambrose's special favorite.
Cottonpickers Congregation.
Why?
Because it's probably the simplest of the lot. All the others were clever, novelty, clever, and I was putting in things just for the sake of showing that the Ambrose's band could do things that most other bands just couldn't do. But I don't think that they achieved the spontaneous, warm reaction from most people that the Cottonpickers did.
Cottonpickers Congregation, which achieved international success for the Ambrose Orchestra and Sid Phillips. Lest we've given you the impression that the Ambrose band at all times was never less than perfect, Sid Phillips and Joe Crossman take you behind the scenes.
See, we'd rehearse my arrangements, and we'd play them after a fashion, with my dictating the phrasing and the effects that I wanted, without Ambrose being in the room. But then he'd walk in, and the whole thing would change. Everything became polished. There was no question about the chaps arguing with me whether my idea was right or wrong. It was Bert who always put the finishing touch on it by saying, yes, I like this, or I don't like that.
Ambrose sometimes was very awkward at rehearsals. You know, he had very good taste in music, really. Although he couldn't do much about it if the orchestration was wrong. He'd leave it all to the arranger to do. And I remember once or twice he used a very peculiar expression, you know. If he didn't like it, he'd tear it up and have another one. Of course, money was no object to him. But he'd say, nah, I don't like that. Sounds like a piece of string.
But I bet he didn't think this sounded like a piece of string. How could he? It featured that blonde bombshell who fronted the Ambrose band so decorously, Miss Evelyn Dall.
While tearing off a game of golf, I may make a play for the caddy, but when I do, I don't follow through, 'cause my heart belongs to Daddy. If I invite a boy some night to dine on my fine Finnan Hattie, I just adore his asking for more, but my heart belongs to Daddy. Yes, my heart belongs to Daddy, so I simply couldn't be bad. Yes, my heart belongs to Daddy, and I want to warn you, laddie, though I think you're perfectly swell, that my heart belongs to Daddy, 'cause my daddy, he treats it so well.
Evelyn Dall, who was one of a number of really fine singers who came to Ambrose in the latter half of the 30s.
I joined the band in 1937.
One of the most famous, Vera Lynn.
I used to frequent a music publisher's, and Joe Brannelly used to knock around at that time, and he was working with Bert. And they were doing some programs for Radio Luxemburg, and Joe heard me singing in the music publishers and suggested to Bert that he use me on these commercial programs. So I did quite a few for them, you know. And he used to try and persuade Bert to put me on to the BBC broadcast, you see, but at that particular time he didn't want to. He had reasons why not. Eventually, Joe wore him down, and he said, okay, so he put me on the BBC programs, and, well, it was from then on, you see, I did all his broadcasts and a lot of records.
Do you remember the first song you sang?
The Love Bug Will Bite You, I think. Was that the one? The Love Bug Will Bite You if you watch it. I think that was it.
Listen, all you people, you better beware. Love's an epidemic, and it's in the air. It's a thing that gets you even though you're very smart. So take some good advice, go out and vaccinate your heart.
The love bug will bite you if you don't watch out. If he ever bites you, then you'll sing and shout, you'll go. That's what love is all about. The love bug will bite you if you don't watch out. If he ever bites you, then you'll sing and shout, you'll go. That's what love is all about. You can't eat, you can't sleep, you'll go crazy. You're just la-di-da-di-da all day. If someone wants to know why you're crazy, you'll answer, go on, swing it, baby, swing it. The love bug will bite you if you don't watch out. If he ever bites you, then you'll sing and shout, you'll go. That's what love is all about.
You go crazy. You'll just la-di-da-di-da-di all day. If someone wants to know why you're crazy, you go dee-dee-dee-ri-dee-dee-dee-hoo-ha.
The love bug will bite you if you don't watch out. If he ever bites you, then you'll sing and shout.
Ri-dee-dee-dee-ri-dee-dee-dee-ri-ri.
That's what love is all about.
Vera Lynn's first record with Ambrose, April the 23rd, 1937. Round about this time, George Chisholm comes into the picture, or more accurately, into the trombone section. And George, being George, I think he might be good for an Ambrose anecdote.
I mean, I always remember a story in the Café de Paris, particularly. Bert Barnes, the arranger, was on piano at the time. And as you know, the piano is normally in the front, for some reason or other. And Ambrose used to stand in the well of the piano. He was very like it. And he was quite an insignificant-looking man. You know, he wasn't a big show-off, a big personality kid. And people used to come up for requests, you know. And at that time, it was the elite. And they used to come up, but they used to ignore Ambrose and go up to the piano player. For some reason, psychologically, the pianist must, being in the front and playing piano. And Barnesy, who was... like all of us at that time, used to like the odd bender, you see, have several jars. He used to gradually fall asleep of an evening as it got near 1:30. But they used to go up and ask him, and this particular night, there was a royal party, and I think it was the year Henry Cotton won the Open Championship. And this chinless wonder came up, you know, with the two short tails. And he made straight for Barnesy on the piano. And Barnesy, of course, by this time, he was giving in very much. He was slooped over the piano, playing automatically. And this man said, I say, could I have a waltz? And Barnesy said, certainly. Got up off the piano and danced with this bloke on the floor. Immediate dismissal, boing, out. He was back the next night, you know, it was just a show. But it was great. And another time, they used to come up and press a fiver or a tenner into Ambrose's hands here. Play Nightingale, will you, Ambrose? Splendid, you see, and walk away, Ambrose. Thank you very much. And this particular night, this fella came up, thought he was very big, and he said, would you play You Are the Sweetest, something or other, and pushed 10 bob into Ammy's hand, you see. And Ammy looked at it and called the fella back, put his hand in his pocket, took out £4.10, put it to the 10 bob, gave it back to the fella and said, go buy yourself a shirt.
Apart from his prowess as a raconteur, as a musician, George Chisholm has given us some splendid moments. Here, with Ambrose, he shares a record with tenor saxist Billy Amstel, who was a cornerstone of the orchestra for many, many years. Together, they're tooting around. Alongside George Chisholm in the trombones on that record was one of the long-serving members of the band, Lou Davis, another immaculate player. He recalls one of Ammy's business ventures, the reopening of Ciro's Club, in partnership with rival band leader Jack Harris.
These two band leaders who had their own particular followers, and they were a similar crowd, decided that it was silly to compete with one another, and they decided to open this club together, which they did. And the arrangement was that the Ambrose band would play in the club until the summer period, and Bert would be the band leader, of course, it was his band. But then, when the new season started, which was in September, Jack Harris was going to lead the band. Well, now, for the first period, this worked perfectly, because Jack was very happy to walk around the club and talk to people and be very proud of the crowds that were coming in. He had some very fine artists and singers there at that time. Well, anyway, when this first period came to an end, Jack Harris now stood in front of the same band. Well, Bert wasn't satisfied with this at all. He just couldn't take it.
You mean the walking about?
Yes, I mean, he had to do something. He was jealous of Jack, let's put it that way. So he opened up at the Café de Paris in opposition to his own club. And he did do a lot of damage to the club. And this is the way Bert went along all through his life. He made a fortune, but he never kept it.
Oh, that was Ammy, yes. Mr. Ambrose, rather. He was a great musician, but no businessman.
That's Anne Shelton, too, who came into the band. When, Anne?
Well, I did my audition early 1940 for the BBC. And it was a program Alan called May We Introduce. And Ronnie Wallman took my audition, and we broadcast, and I sang Let the Curtain Come Down. And Ambrose heard it, and through the BBC he got in touch with me, and I auditioned for him at the Mayfair. And I went along with my mother, and I saw him standing there in the dance band, you know, all this set out. And I had a navy blue drill slip on, and he was all in navy blue, with a navy blue suit, a navy blue shirt, and a navy blue trilby hat. Had his hat on. I thought he was a gangster. He looked like a gangster. And he said, hello, little girl. And I sang for him. So he said, do you know this song? And it was Begin the Begin. And he said, what key do you sing it in? And I had no idea there were such things as keys. So I said, I don't know, Mr. Ambrose. So he said, well, try this. And it was Jack Cooper's arrangement in the key of F. And I sang it for him, and I joined the band, which was really an achievement because I wasn't 13 until the November.
Wow.
And on my contract, I just looked at it, I must tell you, it had drawn up this day between Mr. and Mrs. Shelton and infant, not minor, infant Anne. And he treated me like that, you know.
Did he?
And the musicians, which I adored, I've grown up all my life in and out BBC studios with musicians. And if they were telling stories, he'd say, watch it, here's the kid. He was too much, he really was.
Well, you did the audition with Begin the Begin.
Yes, I did.
And in fact, this was the first record you made.
That was, yes.
Back a sound of music so tender. It brings back a night of tropical splendor. It brings back a memory evergreen.
and the palms seem to be swaying. When they begin, they begin. Live it again is past all endeavor, except when that tune clutches my heart. And here we are, vowing to love forever, and promising never, never to part. What moments divine, what rapture serene. The clouds came along to discuss the joys we had tasted. And now when I hear people curse the chance that was wasted, I know but too well what they mean. So don't let them begin. Let the love that was once a fire remain an ember. Let it sleep like that dead desire I only remember. When they begin, they begin. Oh yes, let them begin, make them play, till the stars that were there before return above you, till you whisper to me once more, darling, I love you, and we suddenly know what heaven we're in. When they begin, they begin.
Indeed, Ambrose and his immaculate music were the essence of the golden age of British bands.
You see, we had a society. We had the Prince of Wales, who was the leader of society. We had characters. The golden age was everybody in the evenings with evening dress, full dress, jackets. There was an atmosphere of grandeur about the whole thing, and all these wonderful houses. And well, I think it is a good description of that period.
With their warm memories of Ambrose and his music, Sid Phillips, Joe Crossman, Lou Davis, George Chisholm, the musicians of the orchestra, Vera Lynn and Anne Shelton, the singers, and Cyril Stapleton. My thanks to them, and for its own memories for so many, Ammy's signature tune, When Day Is Done.
The Golden Age of British Dance Bands is compiled and introduced by Alan Dell, additional material by Jeff Milne, and the production was by John Knight.